Hi everyone, my name is Elsa, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to do the first part of my March wrap-up. So, I read so far 7 books and I want to talk to you about them. So first we have Amal Unbound. So this one, it's a middle grade contemporary and it's about this girl. Her name is Amal and she lives in a small village in Pakistan in our time. One day she accidentally offends the local landlord and he forces her to come work in his house as a servant. And so this book was so good. I gave it 5 stars. It's about modern slavery and this theme was perfectly handled. It also tackles sexism in Pakistan, also really well dealt with. And finally there's a strong message about the importance of books and education. So these themes were just perfect for me. And the main character, she's incredible. You love her so much. Like, she was really relatable and everything was perfect. Like the setting, the theme, the plot, everything. Like, I was so invested in this book and it took me, you know, on a trip really on a trip. How can I say that? I read for escapism like most of you, I think, and I usually prefer fantasy for that very reason. And this one, life in Pakistan is so different from our and mine anyway. And this was, I gained a totally new perspective reading this book and it was amazing. It's a bit slow. How can I say that? It's not really slow, but it's not an action-packed book. Like, not many things happen. You just, see her day-to-day life in this house and how she had all the obstacles she has to overcome and things happen. But really, it's so good. And I couldn't put this book down. Just couldn't. So highly recommend it if you're into middle grade. Then we have Beasts of Frey. So this one was an arc. I read it for my job and so it won't come out before some time. And I don't recommend it because I only rated it 3 stars. It's a young adult fantasy novel. It takes place in a fantasy world really inspired by African culture and you have 2 points of view, Kofi and Ekon. And so Kofi, she's working almost as a slave in this animal circus and Ekon is trying to get into this militia that brought him up. And so basically things happen and they have to join forces and go into this evil forest to capture the Shetani, who is an evil monster that has been killing villagers for decades. My problem with this book was that nothing was really wrong with it, but everything was really average and it was forgettable. Like the plot, the setting, the theme, the characters, everything was okay, but just okay, and they could have been so much more developed. And in the end, it just didn't stick with me. I didn't feel anything reading it. The story wasn't that compelling. Like, they go into this evil forest and they face obstacle after obstacle. And there's, it's really predictable, very repetitive. And yeah, just this book was just average. Then we have Crown of Coral and Pearls. So this one I rated also 3 stars and it was a disappointment. It's a young adult fantasy romance. It's the first book in a duology, but I won't be reading the next one in the series. We follow 2 twin sisters, Noor and Zaidi. There's this custom in their village that the most beautiful girl is chosen to go marry the prince when he comes of age, who lives very far away. Zaidi is chosen, but she's in love with someone else, and so Noor wants to help her and her village because the king has been slowly starving them. Decides to go in her place to marry the prince, and that's when the story starts. So there were good things going on for this book. The first one was the main character. So Noor was a really good main character. She isn't really original, but she's very complex. She has personality and you really enjoy having her point of view. The relationships as well between the 2 sisters and between Noor and her family is also very well done. So that was a good thing. The plot was okay, nothing groundbreaking, but it was still very interesting. And the world building as well wasn't incredible, but it was okay. My 2 enormous problems with this book, the first one was the representation. There is no representation in this book whatsoever. There are only white, cisgender, heterosexual characters in this book. And it's recent, like it was published 2 years ago, so no excuse. My other problem with this book was the love story. It's supposed to be a romance, and it was ridiculous, like really ridiculous. And that's why I can't recommend this book. And although there are good things going for it, when the main thing in the plot is the love story and it's so badly done, you can't, you know, just give more than 3 stars. The love interest had no personality, like it was paper character all the way through. They had maybe like 4 conversations in the entire book. They had no chemistry. They were only physically attracted to each other, and it was really obvious. Not a romantic thing happened in the entire book, because you're like, no, they are just attracted to each other. It's not love, like really not love. So yeah, no. Then we have Pet. So this one was so disappointing because I wished I had loved it, but I totally understand why people love it. Like, there are really strong things going for this book. It's just that it wasn't for me. So it's a young adult magical realism novel, but you have to know that it's really, really weird. So it looks nothing like young adult or magical realism like you can see in other books. The story takes place in a near future where the angels, like the good guys, have won, and there are no more monsters. By monster, understand rapists, sexists, racists, religious fanatics, greedy corporations. Everyone you can, you know, picture as bad in our today's society is gone. At least you think they are gone, because one day a beast comes out of a painting and tells our main character, Jam, that there is a monster living in her best friend's house. And so she has to, you know, help it find who it is. So this book had great things going for it. The first one was the representation. The main character is a transgender woman, and there is also a polyamorous marriage, and the entire cast is black people. You also have a strong message that you have to pay attention to the monsters around you, even when you think they aren't there. You mustn't be fooled by appearances. You also have, you know, to talk about monsters and remind people that they are there, so people can be aware and see the signs and expose them to the world. I love the message, but there are things that really bothered me, but that might not bother you at all. So the first thing was the pace. Like, it was excruciatingly slow and very repetitive. It was also extremely weird and unsettling. Like, the world, everything that's happening, and the writing, you know, it's like nothing I had ever seen before. It's a mix between a fairy tale and a young adult book and a metaphorical story and poetry. It's like everything in the mix, and it's really, really weird. And the characters are only shells. They have no personality, no depth. They are just, you know, characters to support the story. There is almost no setting, no descriptions whatsoever. There are 3 locations, and everything around it is a white haze. The dialogues are also really unsettling because they can be, you know, really metaphorical and poetic, and the second after they are like really natural, you know, like things you could say, you know, in the real life talking to a friend. So yeah, the mix was weird, everything was weird. And even the magic, it was so unsettling because it's magical realism. I have a hard time with magical realism, but in this book it was even way more than I could, you know, take. Yeah, try it, you'll see what I mean, but really, really weird. And finally, I didn't like the magical realism aspect of it, because in the end the problem is solved with magic, and I think it's a wrong message to give to people, because in real life, like in this book, it's presented as so simple, like you do that and you have the result and everything is perfect. The problem is in real life you don't have magic and you can't solve things as easily. It took away a part of the message for me. Then we have Mort, by Terry Pratchett. So this is an adult fantasy novel taking place in the Discord series. So if you don't know what the Discord series is, it's a really long series, like 40 volumes I think. And so all the books in the series take place in the same universe, but you have sub-series inside the big series. You mustn't read the books in the order of publication. You have to read them, well, I think the best way to read them is read, you know, knowing you're in the series, like start with the first book in the sub-series and not the first book in the entire Discord series. And so this one you can start with because it's the 4th book in the entire Discord series, but it's the first one in the sub-series of Death. And this one I heard great things about, and I loved it. I gave it 4.5 stars, and it was so good. Like I read 3 books so far by Terry Pratchett that takes place in the Discord series: Guards, Men at Arms, and now Mort, and they were all perfect. Like, they are incredible books. Everything is perfect. Like the pacing is perfect. The characters are incredible. You love them so much. They are so developed and so likable. And they're so flawed. You know, not any of them is perfect. They have so many defaults, all of them, and you love them so much. and the plot is incredible, and it's so smart, and it's so funny, and it's just perfect. Everything you want in a book you find in this one, and in every other, I think, in the Discworld series. I just have to say that this one I really loved, like all of them, but I loved it less than Guards and Men at Arms, that are still my babies. I didn't tell you about the story. So this one, you have Mort, which is a young boy that becomes the apprentice of Death, and it's so good. Like I said, I just have one thing, like tell me in the comments, I want to know, like Death is a character you see in a lot of books in the Discworld series, and I saw him in Guards and Men at Arms, and I loved him so much when he appeared in these books. But in this one, he is one of the main characters, and I didn't love him as much as I used to, and I was a bit shocked by it because everyone says Death is one of the best characters in the entire series. And so I want to know, was I the only one? He was still good, you know, I still liked him, but just didn't love him as much as the other characters and as much as I loved him in the previous books. So tell me please, is it like, you know, you love him more in the other books in the sub-series? I don't know, I hope it is the case. Then we have the Gilded Ones. Oh, this one was such a disappointment. I wanted to love it so much. It was a young adult fantasy novel, and it's about Deka, who lives in this small village that is very religious and sexist. She was always rejected by the villagers because she's mixed race. All the girls of 16 must undergo a test of purity, and she's hoping that it will prove her worth and that she will be finally accepted. But things happened, and the villagers discover that she's an Alaki, a descendant of demons, and that basically she can't die. Like, it's more complicated than that, but it's really hard to kill her, basically. And usually she should have been killed, but the emperor is actually fighting monsters that are coming from the south, and he decided that all the Alaki should be brought to the castle to be trained as soldiers to help the army fight the monsters. So that's the story, and it had such a huge potential. Like, this book could have been incredible, and honestly I blame the publisher. So I will follow this offer, but I won't continue with the series because, you know, it's ruined already, so no point in continuing anymore. So disappointing. So my problems with this book were the structure, the plot, and the pacing. And basically there are problems that the publisher should have seen and should have corrected, because there were so many great ideas that this could have been one of my favorite books of all time, and that's why I'm so pissed. It started out amazing, and then we reached 30% of the book, and then it went downhill from there. And there were a lot of time jumps, and the problem with the time jumps were that you completely lost a lot of things, and that most of the book happened off page. Like, everything you want to see, like she goes to a camp to train to be a soldier, you don't see any of it. There are battles with the monsters, you see almost nothing of it. She is supposed to be bonding with her Alaki sisters, and you see almost nothing of it. She's supposed to grow as a character, and you see nothing of it. She's supposed to have a love interest and a romantic relationship, you see nothing of it. And all of it is told to you like they trained and they became very strong. So much telling and no showing, and you couldn't get, you know, emotionally attached to the characters or the books or anything that happened because you know so nothing of it, basically. The repetition in this book was a huge problem as well. The same sentences were repeated all the time. You also have, you know, the same scenes that were brought to you over and over again with slight variations, like you wouldn't see that it was the same scene as 2 chapters before. The thoughts of the main character were going in circle, like she was always thinking the same things over and over, and she also, you know, was shocked by things she already knew. Like, she discovers something and she's shocked, and then 2 pages later she's told again and she's shocked again, and you're like, you knew that already, what's the problem? And it happened like maybe 20 times. I was so pissed by the end of this book, you can't imagine. There were huge problems of inconsistencies and internal contradictions. Like, by the end of this book, nothing made sense. Like, there were, you could see how things were problematic and you didn't see how it was possible, but you were hoping, you know, that in the end you would get the explanations. And yeah, you have a huge info dump like in the last 12 pages of the book, because you have to explain everything that happened before, and the explanations made no fucking sense. The entire book, when you think of it, doesn't make sense because of the things they explain. Now you're like, so nothing made sense in the end, why did I read this book? So annoying. And you have this attempt at a love story. It's just laughable because the love interest has no personality whatsoever. and they have no bond because they bonded off page, like I said. So you're supposed to believe they have talked a lot and, you know, bonded, but you didn't see them talk like more than 3 times, and you're supposed to believe they're like soulmates or something. No, 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 no. That doesn't work like that. You also have finally the theme. Oh, the theme was so good. Like in the beginning of the book, the theme that was introduced to us was the conflict between religion and feminism. You know, like how can you be feminist in a world where there are sexist things written in sacred books? This was a really interesting question, and it was, you know, so well dealt with at the beginning, because you can see how the character, she herself carries the theme, because she's very pious, but you also see how as she's a woman, she can do a lot of things, and there's a time jump. And so she goes from being a super interesting and well-developed character with, you know, internal conflicts about her religious beliefs and the world she lives in and the things she has to do, and it was so interesting, and time jump, and she suddenly is a perfect cliche badass heroine that has no internal conflict and is perfectly happy being a demon. And I was like, so you just ruined the entire theme and character in like 1 sentence. Why did you do that? And so the theme is completely forgotten. So you just, you know, fight with demon after that, because there is no theme. And by the end, they tried to bring it back up, but it was a mess, an absolute mess. And so yeah, so disappointed by this book. And finally, we have We Are the Ants. So this one was so good. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. So incredible. So it was a young adult contemporary with a little bit of sci-fi. We follow Henry, who is a young boy living in America. He has been often abducted by aliens since he was 13, and one day they tell him that the world will end in 150 days, and so the aliens have the power to save it. But Henry has to choose if he wants them to save it or not. The problem is he doesn't know if he wants the world to be saved, because he sees all the suffering in the world, and especially in his own life, because his grandmother has Alzheimer, his father left, and his mother has been depressive ever since. His brother dropped out of college and he got his girlfriend pregnant. And Henry himself has been bullied for years, and his boyfriend committed suicide a year ago. So he has a really hard life, and he thinks if the world would just end, it would put an end to all the suffering. And this book took me on a journey. Like, it was so emotional and so touching and so beautiful, and really makes you think a lot about life, about everything around us. I absolutely fell in love with the main character. Henry is just so human and touching, and you just root for him. You want him to be happy so bad. And he also has this cynical point of view of things. Like, he's the narrator, and his cynical point of view really gives a different tone to what you would expect in this book. Like, this book is really sad and heartbreaking at times, but it's really also really funny and light at other times because of Henry's point of view, and it's just so good. And it tackles a lot of heavy subjects like suicide, harassment, grief, and mental diseases, and they are all really well handled, and just a beautiful and impactful book. There isn't a plot exactly, because you just follow Henry's day-to-day life during 150 days, but everything that happens is just so interesting. Like, it's not boring at all. Like, I couldn't put this book down, so don't worry about that. It's just that you won't know what will happen until it happens. It's just this way, and just, you know, so beautiful. I highly recommend it. I listened to the audiobook for this one. It's really good, so if you want to check the audiobook, just go for it. So this is the end, guys. Thank you for watching, and if you have read any of the books I talked about, please tell me in the comments. I would like to know what you thought about them. I will do soon a second part for this video. Thank you for watching. See you around, guys.